Salvete omnes, welcome to the AP Latin live stream here on YouTube. I am Ben Johnson, and I am a Latin teacher at Hamden Academy in Hamden, Maine. And I am joined here on our live stream by,
It's me, Jenny Luongo.
What? Jenny, do you do something different with your hair?
Yeah, so I teach at St. Andrew's Episcopal School here in Austin, and today, ego sum Charon. Today, hodie, Ben.
What does that mean about me then?
You're going to find out soon. Hodie emus, we are going ad mas umbras Arabi. So today, Ben and I are going to take you to the deepest shades of the underworld. This is the spectaculum, the show, in quo Aeneas ad genitorem. So Aeneas descends ad genitorem to his father, to the deepest shades of Erebus. So get ready, kids.
Sounds like a fun time, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Jenny, cur illas vestas geras?
Sum Charon, navitas tuia, vehote ad imas umbras Arabi.
Ene, adne imas umbras Arabi?
Tu est Troius Aeneas, pietate insignis et armis, tu ad genitorem descendis ad imas umbras Arabi. Crede mihi, nunc aperi mihi ramum qui in veste latet.
Quid? Pater meus vivus est.
Pater tuus non super est, tu est Troius Aeneas, ramum aureum in veste.
Hic est. Eamus ad imas umbras Arabi.
Eamus.
All right, so that's just a little bit of a dramatic reenactment of where we're going today. I want to thank my student who's in my AP class, Henry Erlinger, for helping us with that. There were a couple of minor spelling issues on one slide. Don't worry, Henry, you don't have to be perfect. It's okay. We all make mistakes. Ben and I know that. Happens to us all the time. I also want to thank my friends Tweely Bang Collins and Victoria McCloskey, who may not know that they inspired that video, but they did. All right, so let's get to, go ahead.
Case of mistaken identity. I don't think I am Trojan Aeneas. I mean, I don't cry as much as he does. How about that?
All right. That seems to be true based on the last 8 live streams. I'll give you that.
Okay, so today we're going to Hades ... That ellipsis will be completed at some point in the near future. So we're going to cover book 6, lines 387 to 425. It's a unit 8 section. So we know that specifically this content isn't going to be covered on the AP exam, but as we talked about in the first couple of live streams, part of the whole thing about cutting content from the syllabus is because we're telling colleges that we will be covering some of the content that isn't on the test in these live streams. And like, quite honestly, I'm a personal anecdote quickly. When I was in college a long time ago, I read book 6 in English just to cover that before going on to the Opus Maius, the greater work in 7 through 12. And I found this to be so gripping and entertaining that I stopped reading it in English. And I was like, we have to read this in Latin because it is so awesome. So we're going to cover this bit, demonstrate knowledge of Latin grammar and syntax. We're going to assume that you've read at least some parts of the Aeneid. I mean, yeah. And you're aware of Aeneas, and you know a little bit about the underworld in Greco-Roman mythology. You don't have to know everything about it, but just some parts of it. We do have some stuff to cover from the last live stream on De Bello Gallico 620, and we'll do comprehension of parts of this. Virgil's complex, we don't have a lot of time, so we'll pick apart a couple of interesting passages. We're going to talk a little bit about the underworld and its role in epic. And then, I mean, hey, Jenny, what's the deal with the accusative case?
What is the deal with the accusative case? We're gonna delve into that later today. So as you guys probably know by now, we put all sorts of things for you in this bit.ly/AP Latin YouTube link that gets you to a Google Drive folder. If you've been on today, you may have noticed that we've added an Aeneid Book 6 folder there that's going to have all of the information for today. You'll want to have out a way to record your own thoughts and answer our questions. Perhaps a textbook, especially today we're moving into Virgil, so you might want to have a commentary on Virgil or work from your own class if you already did this with your teacher. We did put some closed translations for the work today in the resource folder if you want to use that to help you guide yourself along. Notice that we are skipping some lines in this section of book 6, so you'll want to pay attention to the line numbers on those closed exercises. And you might even want to think about printing out a text of this section of the Aeneid to mark up and make notes on. You're going to find as you get to cite passages, which we know we need to focus on prepping for the exam, since there is going to be a cite passage that you answer questions on the exam. You might want to kind of be a little more active as you look at it the first time and underline things you notice. And we'll show you some ideas about how to do that today.
Okay. So we have a warm-up, right? And this was from the last live stream on Friday. We asked you this question. So we gave you a little bit from Virgil, book 4, which again is not on the exam, but it's good to be able to parse through some Latin on some detail about fama, rumor, and Virgil's awesome personification of her, along with a bit from the Gallic War 620, which also talks about rumor and its role in the state, and find 3 pieces of evidence from each passage to justify why governments would want to manage rumors well. So that's quite a big topic. So here, this is lazy reporting here, but so let's start with, as we go over this, because we want to go over this just in a couple of minutes, let's start with the Aeneid passage first, because Virgil does a great job of explaining through this personification of rumor what all of the horrors and evils of rumor. So we have, and I'll just run through those highlighted, bolded orange lines. We have the fact that rumor is swifter than any other evil, and she's small, parva. Does that sound familiar, Jenny?
Yeah, similis mihi.
She's parva at first, primo, because of fear, right? But then she becomes bigger later. So people are afraid to spread rumor initially, but once it becomes commonplace, then it becomes something that people are able to do very freely. She's swift with her feet, pedibus celerem, and swift with her wings too, that are pernicibus, her screeching wings. She has eyes underneath all of her feathers, her plumae. She's got tongues, she's got mouths, and she has ears. So the feathers help her fly quickly, to go all over the area. The eyes allow her to see everything. The tongues allow her to tell people. The mouths allow her to also tell people. And the ears allow her to hear all sorts of rumors. She flies at night. And in the daytime, she sits custos, as a guard, and she's able to observe everything. She doesn't sleep. Nec dulci declinat lumina somno. And she terrifies great cities. That phrase hopefully should be familiar to you, because we talked about it last time. Tam ficti pravi quae tenax quam nuntia veri. She is as gripping a messenger of fictions and evil as she is of truth. So she spreads truths and falsehoods alike. So if that is rumor, why do you think the governments would want to prevent that from happening? And so in Caesar, we see how the Gallic society has said that if you hear something, some rumor about the state, you are to tell it to a magistrate, a public official, and not tell it to anyone else. because men that are rash and ignorant are often terrified of false rumors, falsius rumoribus terrari, and they're driven impelli to crime, and they sometimes grab hold of a plan about de summis rebus, about matters of life and death, about really important stuff. They are rash. And magistrates, when they have this information, are able to hide the things that seem to be needed to be hidden, and they put forth to the crowd the things that they've judged to be useful. And then nothing about the Republic is spoken less than a council. So this way, according to Caesar in Gallic society, it's important because of the things that maybe people would do if they hear about the rumors that are false. Although Virgil tells us that sometimes rumors can be true, or they have a little bit of truth. And in fact, in book 4, everything that Fama spreads about Aeneas and Dido happens to be true. There's nothing that's false about it. It's very interesting. Anyway, that is the AP exam practice in a nutshell. I hope you guys wrote a 5-page essay on it. So, right, I mean, that's all over. I mean,
always
that's
our hope. Always our hope.
That's why we gave you the whole weekend to do it.
Right.
So,
right.
okay, so we're jumping right into the middle. I mean, right into the middle of the Aeneid, and we have to give you a little bit of context here. So, so previously in the Aeneid, how far back do we need to go? Aeneas is going down to the underworld in order to visit his dad, Anchises, who died in book 3. Even though in book 1 he was already dead, but that's how it goes. And Aeneas has to, he's told to go to the underworld by this guy Helenus in book 3 in order to see the future glory of Rome. And in order to get to the underworld, he goes to Cumae, which is a town in Italy near Pompeii in Naples, if you know about that. And he visits the Sibyl, and the Sibyl is a prophetess, a priestess of Apollo, and she tells him a little bit about what he's going to experience in the second half of the Aeneid, and also that in order to go to the underworld, he needs to do a couple of things. He's got a dead companion, needs to be buried, make some sacrifices, and find this thing called a golden bough. It is a branch that is made of gold that supposedly, I think Virgil probably invented this, supposedly allows the possessor free entrance. It's like a key into the underworld. And that's going to play an important role. So Aeneas and the Sibyl, then Aeneas goes and finds the golden bough. And when he gets that, he and the Sibyl then go down into the underworld from in this portal, this entrance in Cumae. And down they go, and he approaches the Acheron and Styx, where Charon is ferrying souls of the dead across. And we learned that you have to be buried in order to go across into the underworld. And if you aren't, you have to wait around for 100 years. And that part is actually in the section that's on the syllabus in this. And then he runs into some companions. He runs into this guy named Palinurus, who happened to die at the end of book 5, and he talks with him for a little bit. And that's kind of where we pick up. So I'm going to do something new here. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to, whoops, we don't want that. Go to my iPad. So,
Ooh.
Do you see it?
Not yet.
Okay.
But we're excited that we're gonna see it.
Okay, so here we go. So this is the first section that we want to cover today. This little bit. So Aeneas has seen Charon from afar, and then he runs into Palinurus and they chit chat about it. And Palinurus says, "Bury me," and Aeneas is like, "Well, whatever, can't." And the Sibyl's like, "We need to go." And so then they approach the river, and Charon sees, he's in the middle of the river, and he sees Aeneas from afar in his boat. And he addresses Aeneas thus. Let me see if I can, okay. So so this is what he says. He says, "Quis es, qui armatus nostrad flumina tendis." And the key thing here, he doesn't know who he's talking about. He says to Aeneas, "Whoever you are, quis es." And he says that you are armatus. And that's a key that maybe brings back to this earlier thing, that Aeneas is really scared when he goes into the underworld. And so he draws his sword, even though his sword actually doesn't have much use down there. And he's calling Aeneas out by calling him armatus. You guy, the one guy that has the that has this weapon, you who are heading ad flumina to our rivers. And then in line 389, this is really important. He gives him a couple of things that he says he has to do. Fare age. He says, go, speak, tell me, quid venias, with an indirect question, why you are coming. But he says, jam istink, at that point from there, like don't come any further. Et comprime gressum. This idea of stepping is going to come back. Stop moving too. And he says that this is a place, umbrarum, a place of shades, a place of sleep and of sleepy night. He says that it is a sin, nefas, right? It is not right. It is illegal in some ways, according to religious law, to carry vectare, so nefas takes an infinitive. And then we have this issue where we have four words here that end in an A. So Jenny, what do you think we should do?
You know what? I love this part. We're going to have to scan that line.
Scan. Okay. So I think I can do this. Corpora viva ne fas stugi a vectare carina. Okay. So the longs go together and the shorts go together. So to carry, okay, so a short A can be an accusative plural, to carry living bodies by means of my Stygian boat. So it's wrong, I can't do that. But we know that people have actually gone down into the underworld before now. And this is where he brings up the two people that he really wishes that he hadn't gone down and hadn't gone down and he had to force to cross. And the first one there is this guy Alcidane, which is how Hercules, so let me write Hercules shows up in epic because Hercules is actually a word. It's long, short, long. It can't fit in hexameter. So we have to refer to Hercules by other names. And Alcides is, he's the grandson of Alcaeus. And so this is a way that we can talk about. It's a patronym. So he wasn't overjoyed to have received. So akepisse there is a perfect infinitive, to have received Hercules as he was going on my lake. I didn't like that, nor this other guy, Theseus, who a lot of you guys know because he slew the Minotaur, but he also went down with his friend Perseus, who is right next to it, in order to abduct, kidnap Proserpina, Persephone, the wife of Pluto, Dis. And so Theseus also went down into the underworld. This is one of those things that heroes do. And then, so Charon tells this guy who's immortal, and he knows that he's immortal, that he can't bring mortals across into the underworld. And he didn't really like it when he had to bring Hercules and Theseus and Perseus down into the underworld. But he says that the one thing that they had, though, is that they were geneti dis. They are born from gods, and that they're invicti viribus. They're unconquered with their strength. So in some ways, we can think of this as being like the two things that you need to have in order to pass through Charon's kind of gate entry post. I mean, looks to me like Aeneas, he's born from the gods, right? He's the son of Venus. And I mean, Virgil would probably say that he's invicti viribus, that he is unconquered in his strength, and he does have that heroic strength. So he should be good. But remember, like Virgil made sure that Aeneas brought this extra little bit of get into the underworld for free by means of the golden bough. So moving on to the next section, we have the response from the Sibyl, and there's a couple of lines in between, but the Sibyl response, and the Sibyl is Aeneas's guide. It's kind of from our perspective as moderns looking back at the Aeneid and everything, this is when Dante takes over this idea of going into the underworld. He bases his version of the Inferno of hell on Virgil, but he turns Virgil into the Sibyl guide, and then he himself becomes that that person going through for the first time. So this Sibyl, though, is Aeneas's representative, and she's the one that responds and talks to Charon. And she says, nullae hic insidiae tales. So there are no such insidiae, no such trick. There's no such trick here. Okay, and that's important because Hercules and Theseus and Pirithous, like they weren't going down there for a good reason. Hercules had to go down in order to for one of his labors, for the last labor, the 12th labor, to get Cerberus, which we'll find out, and tricking and abducting the queen of the underworld into leaving, so that Pirithous could marry her, so to speak, is a that's not good either. So so the Sibyl's trying to get Charon here to say, like, don't worry, okay? Oh, by the way, she says, nec vim tela ferunt. Remember that Charon pointed out that Aeneas was armatus, that he was armed here. He says, no, these weapons don't carry any force. Like, it's nothing that you need to worry about. And then we have this very complicated phrase here. This is really complicated Latin, where we have licet, which is normally followed by an infinitive, but here it's followed by an ut clause. And we can translate this, a lot of people translate this as like, you know, although, it's like concessive in nature. So although that ingens janitor, this huge guardian, which is going to be Cerberus, you know, he's going to terrify down here, exsanguis umbras, bloodless shades, barking eternally in his cave. And this is a reference to the fact that, like, you know, oh, don't worry, we're not going to steal Cerberus, right? That's not what our job is. Not like Hercules. That's why Hercules came down there. Just let Cerberus be. He'll be fine. And then also we have this reference in 402 to Proserpina, the queen of the underworld, whom Theseus was trying to abduct. She's going to watch over, or to keep, her the threshold, well, the threshold of her patrie, of her uncle, because it just so happens that Pluto is her uncle, because her dad is Jupiter, right, and her mom is Ceres, and that makes Pluto then her uncle. Right,
Better
I'm
not
right
to
about that.
question the
Yes,
ancestry
we
of the
don't.
gods too much,
No,
right?
we don't. No, we
It's
don't.
that hieros gamos, that sacred marriage that's just different from mortal marriage.
Right. So remember, so Charon initially was like, okay, so we have Hercules and Theseus, and this guy better not be like them, because I really didn't like having to do that. And he's armed to, like, holy cow, like 3 strikes. I'm not going to take Aeneas across the river Styx here. And the Sibyl responds and says, the sword doesn't matter, and we're not going to take Cerberus, and we're not going to take Proserpina. Like, you don't have to worry. She doesn't actually start off by saying what Aeneas is going to do, though. She first diffuses Charon's rage in some ways. Then she gets into saying who this guy is. Okay, he's Troius Aeneas. He is Trojan Aeneas. He is insignis. Now, this phrase should be familiar to you guys. He is insignis pietate. He is marked, how? Marked with piety, et armis, and with his weapons. And this kind of goes into this whole idea that he is kind of an invictus viribus. He's unconquered in his strength. He's marked with his piety, and he's marked with his weapons. And then we find this nice little phrase that we brought up at the beginning, ad genitorum, to his father. Okay, he is descending. And then we have the second phrase, to the imas umbras, to the deepest shades of Erebus. So we find out he is marked by piety. He is so pious that he's going to see his dad. And that should be enough to get him into the underworld. See, if nulla modifies imago, if no image tantae pietatis, of such great piety. This phrase, if you do read Virgil, this phrase comes back a couple of times. If no image of such great piety moves you, moet te. And then this is where the Sibyl, like, has that little ace up her sleeve, right? And it's literally up her sleeve. Yeah, we have this ramum, this branch. Qui, Tell me more about the branch. It's qui veste la tebad. It was hiding in her cloak. She aperet, reveals. And Virgil's really cool here because he has, like, we can actually see, and he gives us the stage direction of when the Sibyl reveals this ace, this trump card, where he says, but this bow, at ramum hunc, and then she reveals the bow. Agnoskas. Bit of interesting grammar. This is present subjunctive down here. Could be a potential, could be adjussive. It's a you should recognize this bow. Yeah. It could be like a recognize, like adjussive, how adjussive subjunctive is like a gentle command, but I like it to interpret it as like, you know, if the piety isn't going to work, like you really should recognize this thing. And then the second that happens, then the lines that we don't have, Charon's wrath just kind of falls down, and then he lets them on the boat, and then they cross. Okay. It's a nice little review of the lines. Hopefully I did a good job.
Yeah, you did a great job. And now, if they had any trouble understanding that fantastic video, which will probably be nominated next year in the Oscar shorts, then
we'll get the spelling right though.
Yeah. We'll have to revise it a little bit before the Oscars, but yeah, now they can totally understand that if they were having trouble with any part earlier. All right, so you guys are used to us asking you a lot of questions now. So we're going to have you look back at these two passages that Ben just so ably went over with you, and see if you can remember some questions, or sorry, the answers to some questions. The questions you don't need to remember. Hopefully the answers is what we've got. All right, so here are our Roganda hodie. So number 1. How does the speaker address Aeneas? So that's at the very beginning of this passage. Number 2, what are 2 things he commands him? Quote the Latin for extra points. Everybody got 100 for the day, but this would be extra credits. So, you know, for those of you who want some. So when you're looking for things he commands him to do, you might want to look for the imperative mood, which just a reminder is like that present infinitive without the RE on it. Number 3, what's the case of somni in line 390? And then with what 2 other Latin nouns is it parallel? And when we talk about parallel structure, we're looking for things that are in the same case. So that's what you should aim for once you figure out what case it is. Number 4, what case and use are corpora viva in line 391? And in that same line, what are the case and number of stugia carina, which Ben scanned for you guys. So hopefully you remember that part. Number 6, explain why the speaker brings up Alcides and Theseus in this moment. And number 7, give the Latin and English for a 2-word phrase that describes both Alcides and Theseus. And they're actually 2 different 2-word phrases. So another extra credit opportunity, obviously there. Do we have 30 seconds we could give them today?
I think we do.
A lot of questions. All right, let's have 30 awkward seconds now.
Alcides is Hercules, right?
It is. Yeah, I was testing them to see if they remembered it, but I think it's good to give them a clue.
It is kind of interesting, just to fill up the time, don't pay attention to this, guys, how sometimes the poets try to see how smart and clever they are by coming with obscure patronyms and stuff. Ovid's really famous for this. Virgil not so much, but still sometimes it's one of those like, ha, do you know who this guy is? Because you probably don't. Go do some research. Okay, here we go.
All right, so here are our answers. Number 1, how does the speaker address Aeneas? Again, Charon says, quis es, whoever you are. He doesn't quite know who he is, but he knows he's Armatus and that he is Tendus. He's aiming nostrad flumina to his rivers. So number 2, what are the 2 things he commands him? The first one is the fare age quid veneas, if you were going for the extra credit. And he says, you know, go on, tell me why you're coming. And then he commands him comprime grassum, stop your step. So the case of somni in line 390, he says hic locus est. This is the place somni, of sleep. So that's a genitive, and it's parallel with the other genitives umbrarum, of shades, and noctus, and of night. Those are the things that this place is all about. Corpora viva. So we talked about that. It is not right to carry corpora viva, living bodies, the direct object of vectare. And then the case of studia carina, which we talked about, those scan long. Don't forget you can scan to figure out when we're in dactylic hexameter, whether it's a long A, that would make it ablative singular. And then he brings up Hercules and Theseus because they both went to the underworld. The two-word phrases that describe both of those guys are dis geniti is one of them, born from the gods, or invicti viribus, unconquered by their strengths. All right, let's try another set of questions about that other passage that we went over. So this is when the Sibyl is answering Charon. So question number 1, we want the case and use of tela in line 400. And then number 2, who was that Janitor that was mentioned in 400? Number 3, what are the case and use of genitorem in line 404? And then to whom does this genitorem refer? Who is the genitorem? Number 5, what's the case of Arabi in 404? Number 6, the case and use of imago in 405. Number 7, the adjective that agrees or modifies imago, agrees with or modifies. Number 8, the person and mood of agnoskos, and then translate that word. So when we say person, we're asking for first, second, or third person. And when we are asking for mood, we're asking for indicative, imperative, or subjunctive. Sometimes my kids like to turn those into like a multiple choice question in their head if they kind of know what is being asked. And then number 9, there's only one superlative adjective in this section. So find it. All right. It's a treasure hunt. All right. We'll try to spare 30 seconds again. What do you think, Ben?
I think so. Yeah. Little hints about that superlative, though. It doesn't look like a superlative. So,
No, we're being tricky today.
That's a cruel question.
Yeah, we're being very tricky today.
Although I translated it correctly as a superlative. So
hopefully they were hanging on your every word and memorizing your every word. That's what they should always do.
I mean, doesn't everything just get seared into your brain? Everything that I say.
Right.
Okay, we ready?
Sparatusum. All right, kids. So my students always get freaked out when I ask them for something like that's the nominative subject of a verb, but sometimes that's the answer. So remember the Sibyl was saying there are no such, tricks, treacheries here, hic, and tela ferunt. His weapons don't bring whim, violence. So that tela is just the nominative subject. So if it seems obvious, it might be, kids. Number 2, the Janitor, the doorman mentioned in 400 is Cerberus, that 3-headed dog of the underworld that we're going to get to talk more about later. Number 3, the case and use of genitorem. So the EM, that would be accusative, and it comes after ad. So ad genitorem. It's almost like a accusative place to which or something like that. Number 4. To whom does this genitorem in line 404 refer? So genitorem means the father. And remember, Aeneas descendit ad genitorem. He's descending to his dad, Anchises. Number 5, the case of Arabi in line 404. Remember, he is also going ad imas umbras Arabi, to the deepest shades of Erebus. Maybe if they didn't get the superlative, they knew it now. Number 6, the case and use of imago in 405. So this is often a tricky one for AP Latin students, but nulla imago, see nulla imago, if no image, tantai pietatis, of such great piety, te moet, moves you. This is another nominative subject. It's like leo, leonis. It's going to end in an O in the nominative, and some of those third declension words do that. So we talked about number 7, the adjective that goes with imago is that nulla. And then agnoskos, because it ends with an S, is second person. It's the you form of the verb. And then agnosko, agnoskere third conjugation. So the A is representing subjunctive. So I think Ben talked about how we could translate that. You should recognize, but you may recognize this branch, something like that. And then finally, that superlative that I gave away is emos. Usually for superlatives, we look for double S's, we look for double R's, we look for double L's, but emos is an irregular one. Virgil uses it all the time. So be on the lookout for it. It does mean deepest.
So what's the positive degree of that?
So I want to say infra. You're testing me, but is that right?
Inferus?
Oh, there we go. Inferus.
Yeah.
I knew it was something like that.
There you go. We didn't plan that, so I'm sorry.
No. He's just testing me now, but it's good. It's good. All right. So here we are at this check for understanding today. We've got some more questions for you. And we told you we were going to be talking more about Cerberus. We're not going to preview this passage with you. Instead, we're going to try something different. I know. So we're going to suggest that if you're watching this live, maybe you take a picture of your screen with your phone so that you have the questions in front of you, or you scribble down some notes about the questions. Maybe you open your commentary to this particular page.
And they could pause the video maybe too if they wanted to.
Yeah, or if they're watching it certainly later, this would be a good time to pause the video and go through these questions. We're going to come back to them in a few slides, but I'll just go through them really quickly. We want to know what literary device is in that first line, Cerberus through Trifalchi. We want to know the case and use of regna in that same line. Then we want to know the case and use of colla in the third line. We love to ask about A's because A's can be so many things, and you have to scan sometimes, which we love as well. Number 4, look at this. Look at all these A's. We're just torturing them today. What case is rabida in 421, and what noun does it modify? So what is it agreeing with? Number 5, what case is gutera in the same line? So they're going to have to use that skill you taught them earlier of scanning, Ben. And what adjective modifies gutera? And then finally, what is the case and use of toto antro in that last line, 423? All right, so we're gonna keep moving, and we'll come back to the answers.
Okay, so here we go. Debrief and summary. We like to ask you some questions to think about that maybe take our understanding of this beyond just the simple translation. And this is the Aeneid, and the Aeneid is one of the great, if not greatest works, I would argue, the greatest work of literature ever made. And so like there's a lot of questions to think about. So for us, this is the first time that we've had the Aeneid. So we're going to go with maybe a basic question. Why does Aeneas go to the underworld? I mean, that's kind of like what's the plot. But what role does this have to do with both A, the greater work of the Aeneid, and B, epic genre? So if you know anything about epic, ancient epic, often heroes do go into the underworld. That's one of the feats that heroes do that shows they are separate from regular people. And Aeneas is kind of following in that tradition. So it's one of those traits of epic that you get. So Virgil likes to model his stuff on Homer, and Odysseus kind of visits the underworld in his epic. And in some ways, this is different because Odysseus doesn't actually go through the underworld. He lets the underworld kind of come to him. And Aeneas is going through in kind of seeing absolutely everything, and like he becomes that. But we see it too in how he's kind of compared to Theseus and Hercules too in this. So it kind of reinforces his heroic nature while also filling in that role of genre. But what about the greater work of the Aeneid? And for me, I like to see book 6 as this bridge between the first half to the second half, and how Aeneas goes through the underworld and he sees all of the people a lot of the people that represent his past life. So he goes and he sees someone that represents his travels, and that's Palinurus. He sees this guy who tells him all about the sacking of Troy, which we get in book 2 of the Aeneid, and that's Deiphobus. And we get a little bit more about Helen too. And then we also see Dido, which represents like Aeneas's adventures misadventures in Africa and Carthage. And so really the underworld kind of looks at all of those bits that happened in 1 through 5 and gets Aeneas to kind of pass through them and let them go. And then he goes into Elysium, which we'll get to on Wednesday, and he sees the future greatness of Rome. And he's instead of looking backwards now, as he goes to the underworld, he learns to look forward and look into books 7 through 12. And the little bit at the end with the two Marcelli, which we'll talk about, kind of gets him to understand the greatness of the wars that he's going to be fighting in 7 through 12, as well as the tragedies and the deaths of a lot of these young people. And so it is as much a transition for Aeneas as it is for the work itself. And it's great to see it. We will dismiss books 1 through 5, and we will move on to 7 through 12. So that's kind of how I see the role of book 6, even if it's really cool to read about going through the underworld. I don't know about you, Jenny, but I mean, some of the bits that Virgil describes here is just like, wow.
Yeah, it's super cool. And then also we get this kind of good wrap up, good or bad, however you want to see it, of the Dido story if students have read book 4 with their teachers. So that's good. All right, the accusative. They've been waiting this whole time.
What's the deal with the accusative, right? There's more to this, the accusative, but these are like the big 4 when we were thinking about this, that the accusative can be the direct object of a verb, like hunc ramum agnoskas. You should recognize this bow, where the hunc ramum is receiving the action of that agnoskas. But we also saw in this passage where the accusative case can be the object of a preposition. And in fact, there are actually more prepositions that take the accusative than take the ablative, which
Quid.
is, I know.
No,
We teach them about, right. So, and we saw this with ad genitorum, to his father, but you also see it with in velam, into the house, add prepositions that often deal with motion towards, take the accusative. Circummaria omnia, from the first part of the Aeneid, around all the seas. Those are all of the accusative. We also see the accusative with time and space. So maybe for how long something happened, or for the distance of something. And we've used this before, the accusative of how long for time. Tres horas ambulabam. I was walking for 3 hours. And then well, we've talked about indirect statement quite a bit. So the accusative can also be the subject of an infinitive, especially an indirect statement. And so dixit Aenean pugna visse, she said that Aeneas had fought, something like that. So just a good overview. You never know, right? We might ask you, the question might be asked about, like, what's this accusative doing? You should be able to at least come up with, I would say, like, one of these 4. These are the 4 common ones. So if you have these 4 on the tip of your tongue, you might be in great shape.
Yeah, it's helpful. Okay, so we're going to quickly go through the answers to your practice for today, and then you're going to see this passage again in your practice for homework. So don't think you're done. All right, so the literary device in 417, we have Cerberus ingains, huge Cerberus, personat. He resounds through haec regna, these kingdoms, la tratu trifalci, with his 3-throated bark. So notice how all of those words in the first line are interlocked. When we have A, B word order, it's called synchesis. And here it's kind of a triple synchesis.
It's not A, B, it's like A, B, A, C, B,
yeah.
C. It's like,
yeah.
Well, and often synthesis is used with snakes a lot. And Cerberus has snakes on him.
Yeah, he's got snakes. We're
he's
about
got
to read
3
about
heads,
him.
right? And so there's 3 things here. I mean, it's very vivid. I love this. I love this.
Yeah, it's great. So we just kind of brushed you up on some accusative uses because we've been asking about accusatives a lot today. So regna, resounding through these kingdoms, that's the direct object of personat. Then skipping down to the next line, to him, Kui, the prophet, Wates, talking about the Sibyl, Wedanes, seeing that cola horere, that his necks are bristling. So cola there is the subject of an indirect statement. Hopefully you scanned 421, or you will go back and scan it at some point. And when you do, I believe it's dactyl, 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 before the dactyl spondee. So it's this really fast dactylic line because she's obiecit. She's throwing something at him. And so rabida is an ablative, long A at the end, modifying fame. And then tria, gutera go together. They are both short A's. And then finally, the case and use of toto antro. He extends, having been poured out, his huge body is extended toward toto antro in the whole cave. So that's an ablative place where we did ablatives last week. All right.
Yeah, if one thing too, like if you know that Cerberus has 3 heads and you know that this word means necks, and you're like, well, I mean, I don't know, maybe I scanned it wrongly. You can probably use common sense to see that tria modifies gutra. Never overlook the power of common sense sometimes.
No, common sense is awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So this exam practice with these different questions that appeared on a former AP exam have already been placed in your Aeneid Book 6 folder for you. So you can look there and take care of doing that before tomorrow, where we're going to get to meet Dido in the underworld. Don't forget that resource folder is there for you, bit.ly/AP Latin YouTube, where you'll find your assignment. Also, we've kept open our Padlet feedback. Thank you guys so much for leaving us some feedback about your experience and what you want to see, bit.ly/AP Latin Qs. And don't forget, last but not least, but very important, if you don't have internet connectivity or the tools that you need to take the AP Latin exam, please today go to cb.org/tech. You can tell them about your needs or a friend's needs, and we'll get it taken care of. All right, Ben, I think we did it. A lot of book 6.
Right.
Yeah, more tomorrow.
Excited to find out the conclusion of the relationship between Aeneas and Dido.
Oh, yes.
You think she's going to forgive him for being so horrible?
All I can say is that I wouldn't. So we'll see you tomorrow. Walete.